the first thing.
Yeah, so I mean, I came back to the museum for the residency, and although I knew a lot of the paintings in this room, I got pretty fixated on this particular painting. It's really evocative for a lot of people, and so evidently so. It's a very jarring kind of moment where the Terra gets trapped in ice during one of its earlier expeditions to the Arctic. And there's this very strange sense of light, I'm assuming midnight sun. But I'm learning, as I'm looking at it, that these sailors are taking or bringing things from or off the boat. But evidently it's precariously kind of being pushed in some kind of position. And I'm learning later on that in fact, for a few days, there was great fear that the whole thing would break apart. Because I'm assuming the razor light and would be starting to crack the hull. So they had to take all the provisions off. But later, it righted itself, the ice dissipated, went away, so it moved away slowly, and it was out of danger. But yeah, I mean, just looking at it, also just noticing that Chambers evidently was a really solid draftsman. I mean, I made a drawing of this boat, the way it's been painted, and the knowledge of how the masts enter the hull, how it's constructed, it's very, very evident that whoever drew this knew their boats and knew how they're constructed. So stories, accounts, tellings, understandings of boats, all this information comes to bear in this painting. It's brought together into this dramatic scene. And then I started to look at the area where the boat potentially was going to break apart because of the ice. And the landscape is actually really, really flat. It's actually quite kind of, how would I say, devoid of these incredible kind of ice flows that kind of break apart like this. So this is evidently there for high dramatic effect. And it's something that we're always accustomed to, from early photography to any form of expression. It's all this wonderful line manufactured fantasy fiction. And so, first you suspend your disbelief because you're drawn into, in a sense, the drama of the thing, I think. And then we break it apart before we know, and then it's reassembled by the astuteness of the painting itself. It's a very astute painting.
Different elements of the story woven together.
Yeah.
And so you've taken this as the focal point of exploration.
Yeah.
More.
Yeah, exploration, going somewhere you don't really know. That seems to be kind of what I'm up to. But I mean, certainly, mine is a much safer.
Joining the crew.
I'm joining no crew unless I, get off and go to the Arctic and stand in this kind of landscape, which I have not done. I mean, cold Canada is the closest I've got, but it's wretched. But no, I mean, the metaphor for exploration, endeavor, the metaphor for going to places one shouldn't, the metaphor for not learning from those that have been before or know that territory. There are so many little overlapping narratives that come to bear in a painting like this. And, I always like to kind of overlap associations in the paintings that I do. So I guess it lends itself fairly readily to my process of working. The more I think about it, look at it, it seems right for my kind of preoccupations. And certainly there were some pretty kind of grisly things happening with cannibalism. There's been some pretty kind of awful things with, all these kind of different illnesses that take place through scurvy and also through being poisoned by the cans from the food that they were eating, which is a relatively new invention that they hadn't really discovered that in fact the solder was quite toxic. And just being stuck on this wretched kind of area, the ice flows that they didn't understand would trap the vessel for years, not just weeks and months. In this particular area of the Arctic they were navigating was famous, the locals knew, for drawing ice down and then trapping whatever was there. So there were all kinds of things that were unknown, and the vessel evidently fell victim. But this isn't a depiction of the final expedition. This is, I think, 2 years beforehand. But you know, they're using the Terra, the boat, the Terra. And I found out why it's called the Terra. Why? Well, I asked a couple of the docents, and they went away and started away, and they came back, and they said, well, they thought at first it was kind of the anglicized version of Terreur, that they had captured a French vessel and renamed their vessel something to Terror. But no, they literally wanted it to be a horrifying name, so that when someone, you know, a potential kind of adversary was looking at it, they'd see the word terror, and the word terror would, you know, be terrifying, I suppose. They want, yeah. So, yeah, terror was meaningfully, you know, a terror to the enemy.
The French will understand this.
Yeah, terror. In any language, it's terrible, it's terrifying. But no, originally a bomb boat, it was called. It was a surprise to me when I learned that the Beaverbrook had put this painting in their collection of older paintings. And so when I learned about it, I was really quite shocked because, you know, obviously an artist like Turner, Constable from England, so these are artists I literally grew up with. We're traveling down to the various museums, particularly the Tate in London. So I was ecstatic that I would be kind of looking at my work and just turning the corner and seeing these amazing paintings. So it was Geoffrey Spaulding's idea to create this kind of juxtaposition of the contemporary work against these older works, so that there could be maybe some thematic links, maybe some aesthetic links, and other things that would come up as viewers, you know, passed by. And maybe at first didn't recognize that there were these distances in time between the making of these things. So, I came and gave a talk in November a little bit about you know, some of my ideas about the links and correspondences. But this is a painting called Explosion, and it was really based on some naval battles. And again, you know, it wasn't a specific battle, it was a number of battles that I would download digitally, I would overlap and put through Photoshop until I came up with a composition, although a very simple one, but more to do with this kind of notion of light and something evidently kind of occurring in a fairly kind of dramatic way in the center. But you know, certainly there are things I've taken, borrowed from works by Turner, looking at Turner paintings, landscapes. The brush mark is very much in kind of the, I suppose, kind of legacy of English landscape painters like Constable. I would like to think so. So, yeah, putting these things together and juxtaposing this painting of mine next to these works has been a really wonderful opportunity for me to learn more. And then you have artists referring to these drawings, and you also have illustrators referring to them too that want to make a report of this particular expedition. And so you always feel as though there is this kind of verbal and visual kind of relay of information, and that eventually it kind of fades away, gets lost. So in some ways it's been for me a little bit of a resurrection of that, because I hadn't really heard a lot. I mean, I certainly knew of Franklin's expedition and the fate of it. I mean, it's a very big Canadian story, but it never really kind of caught my imagination until I saw the painting upstairs. So I saw the painting upstairs, I just wanted to know more. You get hungry to want to know more. And so it was for me a little bit of a kind of, it was a relatively fresh story. But it was animated and revivified by referring to these archival things and also referring to the painting upstairs. And so what do I do in all of this? Well, it was like I was saying yesterday, I'm not really a kind of storyteller. And I shy away from that because I'm not an historian and I don't have the kind of skills of a storyteller. But what I seem to do is get caught in my imagination of a particular incident that might have occurred, and I try to reimagine it in a lively kind of fashion. And so I try and explore, you know, what is the goddamn color of cold? What is the touch feel of ice look like as a form, as a shape? How does it pictorially become animate to you? I don't know. But, you know, one of the great pleasures of being in a museum for a month is that I can play and try and figure that out. So that's been really amazing. And now I'm kind of fueled to kind of do stuff when I get back to Montreal. I'm kind of, you know, I'll throw these on the floor like frisbees and I'll look at them and try and figure out where was I going? What the hell was I thinking? And what will I do with all of this stuff? I'm kind of beginning to get a sense of it, but I don't want to over-determine it either.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Yeah, it is a mystery, and actually, in many ways, it's a bit like you're painting this particular way. It's trying to capture an emotion, and it's an emotion, centuries later, many decades later. And here we go. We have this great sacrifice, this great adventure that ends with no one knowing really.
Yeah.
We need an answer almost, you know. And in some ways, your work is a variant on kind of imagining the situation here, you know, these kind of illustrations. They didn't have an eyewitness account of this, and yet in some ways they still provided an answer.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting. I mean, a photographic kind of survey at the time would have been very interesting and very helpful, but at the same time there's something very moving about a pictorial kind of vestige that came from someone knowing the boat, someone actually standing on the ice, and then going back and making these wonderful kind of watercolors and drawings from that experience. There's something a little bit more about it in that regard. There's something about the hand going back to try and make some form of representation that makes it a little bit more enlivened for me, a little bit more real in some ways. So it's wonderfully kind of speculative thinking about what it all means, where it's all going. It just seems to me to be kind of a part of a kind of folly that we still are really kind of involved in so many interesting ways.
Well, the works you got up here is kind of like, you know, you're going from these kind of blues to reds to sort of greens almost, you know.
I mean that's one of the kind of things I do in painting anyway. It's just try and position the palette in ways that is surprising. And what will that do? I mean, painting for so many years, you're always trying to kind of stumble across other ways and other forms of thinking, other ways of thinking about what does such and such a thing express, and how does it express itself, and what do I know already, and what can I kind of move more towards to find out more about. So that's what I love about the speculative nature of this kind of painting for me. It's just, I spill ink in a kind of way over this kind of color here, and it makes a green-blue that I'm unsure of. I've never seen that before. And, that's a very small thing, but it's a big thing for me in how I'm going to go back and think about carrying those kinds of ways of thinking about color and cold and ice into the next paintings and series of paintings.
And the hints of the ship, getting lost within the paint as it was lost in history. And that was sort of and lost in the ice, lost in an adventure, and lost in history. And then found kind of coming once again into a new kind of focus with the more recent discoveries.
Well, there's a kind of sense that I'm painting a ghost.
Yeah.
It's trying to bring that ghost back to the forefront, see what it symbolizes possibly now. It doesn't seem to go away, that kind of temperament to try and push into areas where, more sensibly you should stay away from. Those issues still seem to be pervasive. And so for me they're pretty strongly symbolic of a courage that is kind of full of a kind of strange blind courage. It's an odd kind of human capacity.
To be naive.
To be wonderfully naive,
Wonderfully naive. Yeah,
wonderfully naive.
We can stumble forward.
Blissfully naive.
I mean, it was really cool. And then also, it's kind of like, there's a little bit of hubris too, because my understanding is that this was, the most advanced scientific expedition ever put together, by the British Empire at the peak of their, sort of, I guess, brilliant reign.
It was,
It was Victoria.
It ruled the waves, and the oceans were pretty kind of rife with these Englishmen doing ridiculous things, and other Europeans too. Yeah, because paint is such a warm medium. in lots of ways.
Dynamic.
It's dynamic, it's action, it's activity. So it's almost responding to the kind of the fear and the fright and literally the terror of what it must have been like to be on the goddamn terror. Yeah, so it's terror twofold. That was kind of really pretty much sort of almost like putting in silhouette everything else, almost theatrically, because that was something that certainly the George Chambers painting does, and so do a lot of the paintings by William Smythe that I'm looking at. But I was thinking also of the fact that, you know, they ignored the advice of the people who've been living there for hundreds and hundreds of years. They just completely ignored their advice as to how to get to places, where to go, and later on how to find the people who potentially were going to survive and where they were and where the boat went down. I mean, they just ignored all this relevant information from the people who know the place.
And the great irony is, it was just a year or two back, they discovered the resting place of the ships because First Nations individuals just said, hey, we're here.
This is what
nobody
we
asked.
down, and we know this, and this is what, yeah.
And you're the first person asked.
How did you not ask?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a folly, there's a pride, and it's kind of an adventure too. So yeah, talking about human condition, human kind of attributes which are not always good, not always terrible, but utterly confusing.
I'm sure in the long run we'll work out great. But anyway, human pride is the one we keep stumbling over. So I don't think this is a good example of it. Well, there's a naivete, and there's a pride, and we're going to do this, and it just unfortunately resulted in disaster. But an interesting, a great page in history.
Yeah, I think
And
so.
interesting work.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, for some reason, it's getting me going, and I don't know where it's going to take me. I'm a little bit of an
Well, there's a Turner-esque
But this
quality
is
to it
safe.
all, so we're capturing kind of the steam and the flurry and the fog all at once, and so yeah, actually quite topical. So and I think it's exploring a whole range of things beyond just paint. Narrative. You don't work with narrative that often.
Not really, no, not really. I mean, you know, it's interesting because often, you know, I'm sort of in a position where I'm talking to, you know, a gallery about the next show, and invariably they like a story to propel interest. And I say, well, my painting isn't really about telling stories, it's about stopping stories, or really kind of creating a set of associations that, you know, sort of ride upon themselves a little bit, fold upon themselves. I mean, there are associations and references outside which may be more symbolic, or they may be to do a little bit with one's own kind of touchstone experiences in landscape and place, because landscape invariably is something I deal with a lot. But I'm not talking about a particular kind of unfolding series of events like a story. So this is the first time it seems that I might be touching on that. So it's different.
Yeah, I think it's really, I think the narrative and then your work really do come together in a particular way. I don't know how, really, thinking about it. It's just kind of like, oh yeah, nice little mystery, because, you know, yeah, I can see your work kind of unfolding from you know, a visually recognizable premise, and folding back in on itself, and then re-exploring that. But throwing a narrative in, it's a bit like throwing a monkey wrench into a fine working machine, and something good coming out of it. That's, you know, so,
yeah. Well, it's in its infancy, so you know, as I say, I don't want to overwork it. I don't want to over-assume it either. We'll just kind of.
Well, it's also not just a narrative. It's a narrative we don't know how to end it. We really don't know. It's 90% unknown. We only have little hints.
Yeah.
And in some ways, I think that may be the correlation to your work too. We have enough to work with, but we don't have enough to have names.
Yeah.
You know, in some ways. So I think it does relate to your work in that particular. We have a sense of a forest. We have a sense of a landscape. We don't know exactly where that is. We couldn't use this in some sort of, you know, GPS document. It would just all go straight back to your mind, as opposed to a geographic formation. But so I think, you know, it's an interesting endeavor. It's a new voyage.
Yeah. Well, I'm struck and I'm kind of, yeah, excited about where it might go, for sure.